Welcome to the continuation of Teams Week. So day one was fantastic. If you all were not able to make it, if any of you were not able to make it, please block some time to go back and view the recording. So on to day two. My name is David Greider, and I'll be the host for today's session. Producing the session is my colleague, Michael Gannotti. Today, we're super excited to be joined by Karuana, who is the lead for the customer advocacy group within the Microsoft Teams product group. She'll be here discussing Microsoft Teams as part of a larger strategy for transforming your business and empowering your users. So your organizations not only have concerns around HIPAA and PII, but also around governance and driving successful adoption. So today's session is going to focus on people change management, key business scenarios, setting success measures, and how to drive awareness across your user community.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
I'm sorry. Hang on. Sorry,
okay.
Carol. So the event is brought to you by the Microsoft Healthcare and Life Sciences Group. Please visit us at aka.ms/HLSblog. That's aka.ms/HLSblog. So before we start, a couple of housekeeping items. Please ask questions. We're starting to see some questions in. That's fantastic. For everyone's awareness, all the questions are moderated. And as you can see, please send a shout out. We love to see that. We're always interested on who you are and where you're viewing this webcast from. So at the conclusion, the webcast will be recorded along with any resources that were mentioned during the webcast. Now, how do you engage the Q&A panel? So if you look to the top right corner of your view, you'll see the leave button. Just to the right of that are overlapping dialog boxes. When you click that overlapping dialog box, the Q&A manager will pop up and it will dock to the right side of your view. So with that, I believe we're all set to go. Karuana, I will pass the baton over to you.
Well, thank you. That was a fantastic introduction. Excellent. I am going to go ahead and share my desktop now. And we'll get started. So as David said, my name is Karuana Gatimu, and I am the lead of the customer advocacy team for Microsoft Teams Engineering. I'm excited to be with you today to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is Teams governance and adoption, and really leveraging Teams and M365 for business transformation. I've been in this space, in the collaboration and communication space, essentially my whole career. And it's very exciting to be with a product like Teams that gives us the ability to go back and really improve the employee experience. I love technology. It's one of the core things that I really am interested in. I like to build things. I've been a SharePoint architect. I've been in the SharePoint space for a very long time, and Yammer and Groups and Power BI. All of those things are fun toys in my toolkit. However, what I'm really interested in is people. And we're at a time right now where the employee experience has gone through a lot of evolution, but not necessarily improvement. I don't know how many of you, just maybe put in the Q&A window, how many browser windows you have to have open to get your job done. My gut tells me that it's going to be more than 10. And that's what we refer to as context switching, which is extremely hard on the brain. To get to true productivity, it's important to be able to work with the way that your brain works instead of against it. And so when I teach Microsoft Teams or any part of Office 365 at this point, and especially when we're talking about business strategy and real transformation, I want people to really understand that we're trying to improve a human's ability to focus and do creative work. And to reduce the amount of change fatigue that they have in their environment. Using Microsoft Teams or Office 365 is usually not the only change that's happening in any individual company. There's usually multiple changes that people are trying to navigate, both created externally from market pressures to internally reorganizations, new product lines, all those sorts of stuff. And so the brain is constantly trying to make sure that it can parse all that information. Speaking of purchasing information, I always start with all of my reference information at the beginning of my presentation, because by the time I'm done, you may not remember. We're going to make sure that you have, links to all this. My presentation will be available after the event, so you're going to get all of these slides. You don't have to worry about that. And if there's one link that I would very much like you to remember, it is our Teams Adoption Guide. This you can find at aka.ms Teams Toolkit, and it really takes you through kind of the next part of the conversation about why you should be thinking about Microsoft Teams as a tool for implementing business outcomes and really transforming your space. And so not only does it bring together in one place many of the resources that you can find through other Microsoft properties, it's available on demand, works on your mobile phone, and includes a lot of additional assets from a training and like help desk perspective. And it talks about our 3 phases of Teams adoption, which we're going to talk about today, as well as bring together a lot of these other resources for IT professionals and for driving adoption. So we hope you will take a look at this document, take it with you, and review the different types of resources that are available to you. I always like to call out our day in the life training leave behinds, which we think are really good visual ways of helping people to understand in their context what Teams and Office 365 can do for them. And so, there's just a lot of great stuff involved in this toolkit. So again, that's aka.ms Teams Toolkit. For those of you who are really interested in this topic of adoption, I run the Office 365 Champions program. That is a free public program that you can join that gets you access to pre-release adoption materials. We have a forum on the Microsoft technical community where we're always talking about these topics of adoption and governance and best practices. And so I encourage you to join. There are some European countries right now that are not in the dropdown to join the program. That's going to be changed by April 15th. And so we're excited to be truly worldwide. There's a lot of folks out there. And in the monthly calls, we talk about things for IT pros. We talk about things for what I call the accidental developer, for people who are doing business change, and for folks who may not yet consider themselves power users of Office 365, but they want to learn. So the Champions program is the place for you, and it is my pleasure to run that on behalf of Microsoft. The last resource I want to share with you is called successwithteams.com. And successwithteams.com is your one-stop shop for all of our deployment and technical guidance about the product. Everything from our known issues list to information on upgrading from Skype for Business to Teams. We have our very straightforward guidance about how to roll out Teams. We've done a lot of work to try to simplify this documentation to better address organizations that maybe aren't as complex as some enterprises. But at the end of the day, going through this guidance here that's in the Adoption Hub will really serve you in setting up the right kind of project to work in Microsoft Teams. It's not like other technologies from Microsoft. It definitely requires a more agile, business-led method of doing implementation. And so, this is why you'll see that we have actually optimized and altered, evolved, I'll call it, the adoption framework for Office 365. You're going to see this throughout other products soon as well, into what we call the start, experiment, and scale motion. So a lot of deep dive content there. You can find all of it via the flipbook itself. And so just wanted to make sure that you have access to all those reference items at the very beginning. So I'm going to ask you all to do one other thing as well. As you are giving shout outs over there in the Q&A panel, which I love, and we love questions. So as I go through this, make sure to post them so that I can answer them. I'm here to do that today. I'm going to assume that some of you have at least seen Microsoft Teams. If not, this is just a quick slide to kind of orient us to the Teams client. Microsoft Teams is a part of Microsoft 365 and Office 365. It comes for free in addition to the licenses that you have. And so it really is a new way to drive communication It is the evolution of our product line in the cloud, Skype for Business Online. And so it's actually been totally rebuilt, these functions on Azure, with even greater quality, stability, and reliability built into the product. And so by bringing this together with the collaboration workloads, you really have this integrated experience. And mention that not because it's a cool product feature, but because this is how we start to reduce that context switching I was referring to. And by bringing together the work that people kind of classically did in their file shares, maybe on their desktop, into OneDrive, into SharePoint, into Teams, alongside their chats and communication, that really begins to shift and unify the employee experience. But it doesn't end there, right? It also allows you to customize and extend it. So Microsoft Teams is a development platform. We have many organizations who are exploring how to surface different business workflows inside of Microsoft Teams. We also have a rich ecosystem of first and third party developers who build apps for our product as well. And so between those two things, you can really customize it to meet the needs of different roles in your organization. And I bring up those personas because, life is not equal depending on what job you have in a company. And, formerly there was a lot of heavy lifting involved in really customizing an experience based on a role in an organization or a region or the type of project someone was working on. So we've really tried to shorten the distance between us and what a customized experience looks like for you as our customers. But most importantly, maybe, is the fact that we are built on top of Office 365 existing security and compliance capabilities. Those capabilities are, I believe, the best in the business. And, part of my career at Microsoft, before I joined the product group, I worked in Microsoft IT. I was responsible for Skype at Microsoft, and at one point our SharePoint infrastructure, moving to cloud, and doing business engagements inside of Microsoft. And we had a lot of time to work with our Chief Information Security Officer. And, today there are a lot of threats out there that as a business owner, you have to be mindful of. So I'm always happy to know that we're really delivering a capability through the Security and Compliance Center and through our capabilities in M365 that will allow people to sleep better, at least a little bit better at night. So that's a quick overview of Microsoft Teams as a product. Now let's talk a little bit about why we're trying to drive this change. Change is not just for the sake of change. We know we want to improve collaboration and communication in our organization, but we also have a history as organizations of not always doing those projects very well. Change projects have a high rate of failure. From our research at Microsoft, we know that when executives are visible in the process, it increases the ability to have that change be successful. Making sure that change is tied to true business objectives. It can't just be a message about, hey, we're going to use Teams. Nope. It needs to be a message about, we want to get our life-saving product to the market more quickly. We want to provide better patient care. We want to connect, the administrative or management staff of our health facility with the providers that we're working with, because this serves our business goals. Those are the messages that actually prove to be foundational to a good change project and to an implementation of Microsoft Teams. I am going to do a demo a little bit later. I'm going to show you some of the ways Teams can work for you. But before you ever think about product features in any of the Microsoft 365 workloads, it's really important to have some of these bigger business objectives prioritized and identified. Because the first thing we know as a success factor is defining that vision. You may not be the person who's accountable for defining the vision for Office 365 that you use for your whole company, but maybe you have a role in being able to define how you want to use it in your business group. This ties directly to something that we're running over the rest of this calendar year, and it's called Teams on Teams. And what we're seeing is that there are pockets in every organization that are more willing to change. They're more willing to try new things to meet their business objectives, or they're really under more pressure to deliver. And these people really embrace Teams and move forward with what it can do for them. And they become a showcase example of how to use it in their own company. Teams is not a product where everybody uses it the same way at the beginning. And so having a vision, whether it's for just your work group or your department or even your broader company, will help you to have the right conversation. A lot of people tend to forget that collaboration is not about the tool at all. The tool should recede into the background of the actual collaboration that's happening between the humans on the team. And that is the collaboration that we're facilitating, really ensuring that people can connect wherever they are. So making sure that you have that vision, having proactive leadership support. You may be that leader, as I mentioned, in your own work group. We have some great tools for providing end user training, which we've recently released in public preview, a site template called Custom Learning for Office 365. I think you're going to be excited by that. And then making sure that you're raising awareness in the right ways. One of the training assets that we have is my YouTube show. It's called Coffee in the Cloud. We'll make sure you have a link to that. It just published this week a interview with MVP, who is an expert in doing communications for change management in Office 365. He and I had a great quick interview discussion about the fact that we tend to communicate sometimes about features when we should really be communicating about what's in it for our employees. What are they going to get out of following us through this pathway to change? So I encourage you to, again, we'll post the link to that. So it'll be an asset for you after the fact, and you can go and check out that information. All of this is part of what I call the 6 knowledge areas required to drive adoption and business transformation in your organization. Part of what I do, I'm the author of the Microsoft certification for service adoption. It's an online course that's available via edX. And these are the areas that we really believe you need to lean into to get the most out of what you're already paying for in Microsoft 365, and specifically in Teams. And what's different about this collection of skills is normally you have a separation between technical acumen, business acumen, and marketing and communications. But to be a great service adoption specialist, you really have to bring those talents together so that you can communicate well, you know how to drive an awareness campaign, you're connecting to bigger business goals, and you have the right level of technical competence and acumen to know how to design teams and work in teams or any other part of Office 365 in a way that's going to land the right solution for the people who are working in it. These capabilities are what I've dedicated my career to, and been very excited to see over 7,000 people take this course since we launched it in January. So I think we hit a moment in the industry where people are beginning to understand the power of this kind of capability. So let's now move into talking a little bit more about the framework itself. Office 365, of course, has an adoption framework, and that adoption framework, very good work done by colleagues who I happen to know, but it needed a bit of an update with the advent of Teams. What we knew for sure was that Teams required a more agile project management approach to implementation than maybe we had evangelized before and taught people how to do previously. You'll see here that we have this initial phase, this starting phase, because what we know for sure is that we want people to get their hands on the product, right? Very important for you to get your hands on the product, to begin to understand exactly how different it is before you're trying to make broad scale governance decisions for your entire organization. We believe in a process that's called Plan Teams with Teams, and we're releasing some additional tools which are going to help you to basically have our entire adoption plan pre-configured for you in a planner within a team. And also now with the advent of templates, that's a wonderful thing for us to be able to share with you what we consider to be the best practice of those Teams implementation teams. But what's most important is really getting your hands on the product and understanding how it changes the way you work. In your own organization, you're going to see different things, and it's going to be different depending upon the people that you're working with. So you need that practical information as you're pulling everything together in that initial phase. We also spend a good deal of time talking about having the right project team and talent brought together. And as I mentioned before, many organizations, what happens is that there's a technical implementation team and then the business folks over here, and they don't always talk. That is not a successful strategy for Microsoft Teams. You need to bring those folks together. And again, that may be you in that role to bring them together in your organization or work group. That may be someone else. But we advocate this in pretty much all of our materials, that the technical implementation team and the business leaders with the business requirements have to come together to talk about how you're going to embrace this new product and what it's going to do for your business in the scenarios that you initially want to hit. And so, making sure that you do that, have the right people together, operating in the product, getting your first team set up so that you can do some assessments of how people are working today and whether the organization, its organizational readiness level. That's really, an initial phase that we feel is super valuable. I probably spend more time with my customers in pharma and healthcare, basically all around the world that I work with, making sure the right people are at the table. Because it just streamlines so much further on, as you're working. And again, you can notice I talk in kind of these concentric circles where maybe I'm working with an individual department in a large company. Maybe I'm working with a group of early adopters, and then it then continues to grow. That's very common methodology for teams. But whatever happens, having that talent at the table is the thing that will help you become successful. I do want to pause here for a moment before I go into phases 2 and 3, because there's a lot to talk about there, but I want to hop over actually into the product for a minute.
While you're doing that,
would you have
sure.
Yeah, no, I was just say, do we have questions that I should be answering?
Absolutely. We got a couple of questions that came in, and while you're making that transition, why don't we see if we can get a few in here? So a couple of questions about adoption, materials. You talked about turnkey, or asking about turnkey educational resources.
Oh,
I believe you mentioned edX. Are there others?
Oh, yes. Actually, the edX location is where we have our service adoption specialist course. But for the product itself, we most definitely have something called custom learning, and it's for all of Office 365. If you give me one moment here, let's make sure. I'm going to bring this up, and I'll add this to the presentation. I'll add to the presentation the link to this site that will also link you over to the provisioning engine that will allow you to set this up. But custom learning for Office 365 was recently released in preview mode, and it's a template for a modern communication site that has built into it all of our training documentation that is streamed directly from support.office.com and other locations. And so it's a fantastic resource for people to be able to provision, and then you can turn things on and off. Maybe you're not using Teams yet, or you're not using OneDrive and you don't want the content included. You can certainly change that depending upon the configuration of the site itself. So we're really excited about custom learning and people's ability to make changes to it and really use this web part as a way to help raise the digital literacy of employees. It's free. It's free. It's available today. And as long as you are a tenant admin, you can install it in your organization's SharePoint Online infrastructure and begin to play around with it. It is in preview mode along with the SharePoint provisioning engine. And our general availability will be the 3rd week of May at SharePoint Conference North America. Very exciting stuff. Next
Fantastic.
question.
No, I was going to say, why don't we go ahead and go to the demo environment, because you picked up the other question, which was a question around custom learning for Office 365, which you covered. So thank you very much.
Great. No problem. Yeah, this is one of my, I'm going to go ahead and call it my pet project. I was building the toolkit for teamwork, and some other folks in the SharePoint engineering team and another team were building the web part. And so it's a true one Microsoft story of us coming together to release this free template. And we're just really excited that it's that it's now going to be available. I am going to open up really quickly the SharePoint provisioning service is also fantastic because it's giving people the ability to also deploy other types of SharePoint site templates to play with and see in their organization. So custom learning is just one piece of that. But you can deploy these, an enterprise landing page, a project site, a leadership site, to really see the opportunities that SharePoint Online provides you in these modern site experiences. And then if you come here and click on solutions, you will see custom learning for Office 365, and then you're able to do that installation, as long as, again, you must be a tenant admin to actually have the provisioning engine work properly. So super excited about that. I was going to share that later on. So fantastic. I got to talk about it now. All right, let's go back over into Microsoft Teams. So for those of you who may not know, I'm logged into a demo environment and I'm using the web application. Of course, Teams is available in a desktop application, mobile applications for iOS and Android, as well as the web application. And if any of you are just getting started using Teams, let me tell you the secret sauce. Install the mobile app. And if you're responsible for driving adoption in your organization or onboarding people to new types of projects for research or patient care or any of these sorts of scenarios, have them install the mobile application, because that mobile application is one of the best experiences that Microsoft has delivered in a long time, and especially for driving quick communication, mobile calling. All of these things are available at high quality. I take video calls on my iOS device in Teams, not while I'm driving, but certainly when I used to live in New York, I commuted on the train, and I could easily see myself doing that on the train in a very positive way. So definitely you want to think about that mobile app. So as I mentioned, I'm here in this demo environment. And the first thing I want to call your attention to is this idea of teams and channels. People talk to me a lot about this, about the right way to set these things up. And we've been encouraging people to think about their information architecture as you start to onboard to Teams. The reason being is that what you don't want, the goal for us is for you to have what we call governed self-service. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper dive into the capabilities for governance that are available via Azure AAT Premium and other parts of Microsoft 365 that will let you structure and control the life cycle of your teams. This is important to delivering a positive employee experience. If there's too much friction between your end user employee and their collaboration tools, they will simply stop using your stuff. We've seen this over and over again. They will use a consumer application. They will text things back and forth. They will email with not their corporate email address. And then you really have a data security problem. So having governed self-service, allowing people to provision their own teams within guardrails is the goal for us. We also want there to be curated experiences, and this ties to the SharePoint Online hub and spoke methodology of having these main hub sites and kind of re-envisioning the intranet at the same time you're thinking about teams. So the important thing here is that we've got some teams that are set up, and you can see here that there have been channels that have been pre-configured in this particular area. And I'm going to go ahead and show the other channels as well. Let me favorite that one. In the current soon-to-be current version of the product, that icon, that little star, will actually say show and hide. And that's a great thing because it's a much better user interface for people to know. They know what show and hide actually means. But think of your teams as areas of your business. And quite frankly, having them bigger with more channels is better than having a lot of little teams, especially once you've been in the product for a while. You want to try to keep a lid on how many teams you actually need to be a member of. You're also going to see us do a lot of innovation in this space, allowing you to move things around differently and pin different things so that you can find what you need even more easily. We've got a lot of good customer feedback on this. But the team is an area of your business or a tribe of people who work together frequently to accomplish a business goal. And the channels are like topics within that tribe. The team that I run inside Microsoft has about 700 people in it now. I have 80 different channels. but all of the work in my portfolio is essentially in one place. Obviously, I work in teams, so it's a luxury that I get to move everyone there, and it is a conscious effort to keep the collaboration in that space. But you can do the same thing, and that also ties to some security features and what have you. You can choose what kind of a team you want to create. And this is another important part of governance. So you can, I'm going to go ahead and create a team from scratch here just to kind of show you what this looks like. You have this option of private and public, right? And private and public becomes very important in the organization when you are thinking about sharing information and the boundaries of information sharing, just like we used to do in SharePoint. Public teams are great for things like organization-wide teams. If you have less than 5,000 members in your company, you can have an organization-wide team or a public team that allows everybody to see the content. I have a lot of small to medium-sized companies, who will have a one team for HR or for facilities or for product releases or marketing, and then everybody can easily participate in those conversations. One of the gotchas has been that we did not previously support permissions at the channel level. But I'm excited to reinforce the announcement that we just had at Enterprise Connect that private channels will be available later this year. And that will really help you in controlling the sprawl of teams in the way that we suggest. And private teams are for when I'm having a conversation, like for instance, my team where I do all of my work across my own group is actually private. I don't need that to be discovered until necessary. And I want to manage the people who are in that team as a team owner. Now, there are 5 or 6 owners on my team. So everybody, those folks can do that. But it's not publicly available information. And if I think of things like research projects, for instance, and research projects or, collaborating on the publication of research, things of that nature, that always, we recommend that should be really a private team, and you're inviting the right people in to do that. An org-wide team, again, is really designed for organizations less than 5,000 people. And if you don't have an investment already in Yammer, it's a great place to create that social networking hub and information sharing hub for all the people in your organization, and it will dynamically update its membership based on the users in your Active Directory. So you can create those different types of teams, and that really helps you to get started, right? That helps you to understand what the process of working in teams can be like. And that's really the beginning to understanding the type of team you're going to need to assemble to drive a project of this nature. So you can see here we have some recommendations about the kinds of talent you need. If you're in a smaller organization, this may all be 2 or 3 people, right? But it goes back to that slide I have of the 6 capability areas in terms of what kind of talent you need. And maybe you're a smaller organization or mid-sized organization, but you're going to get some of this help from our partner community or from Microsoft directly. We do both things, obviously. And so that's completely available to you. There is a fast track service that is available to our enterprise customers and a really robust partner community of people who are available to help you. Fast track, of course, is free to help with deployments. And adoption to some extent comes with your Office 365 or M365 subscription. So you're not taking advantage of those services to really help you plan out your transition to Teams. Why, I would suggest that you do that, because ultimately what we need to do is we need to get through this. This change curve is going to be happening for you in yourself, right? You're here listening to this topic, so obviously you have some interest in it. So you have to manage your own ability to go through the change curve in your work group, in your project team, and in your organization. And that's where the challenge really lies. People are going through this change curve at different times, at different velocities across your organization. And leading people through this is part about that technical acumen of understanding the product, setting up the governance rules, being able to provision things for people so that they can start to work with the product. But it's also about understanding where are they as an organization or as an individual in the change curve. right? Are they still really convinced that email is just fine? I have a lot of people tell me that. Email is fine. I don't really need to do anything different. Email is fine. We're not saying there's anything wrong with email. What we're saying is that the new person on your team or the supplier or the person who's transitioning roles in your organization doesn't have access to your email. And so when they come onto your project or into your group, it's very difficult for them to get up to speed. And it's difficult for you to remember how to share information with them. Whereas if they can come into the team, I'm going to go here to Contoso Help, and they can begin to see the conversation already. They can scroll back and see, hey, there was a leadership meeting here that happened recently. And they can go and check out the notes for that. They can come into the files area that's automatically integrated in with this topical channel in the product and have access to these documents. And they can also see the type of work that people are doing because Planner is integrated into the channel. Think about how better of an employee experience that's making for people coming and going. So while your executives or leaders or even other team members may say, email is fine and I don't want to do this, most people really do want to be helpful to others. They're not trying to be difficult. They're just in the resistance phase of this change curve. And we have to speak to them in their language about their business to help them understand why it would make sense for them to invest time with us in this change, this transition. Because ultimately, that's what we're asking them to do. And when you think about their organizational readiness and their reception to change, they may not be being resistant to be stubborn. That's 99.9% not the case when I work with organizations. Most of the time, it's because they may not be in this bucket of early adopters or informed adopters. They may be dealing at the bottom of this slide with more than 3 changes going on in their environment. Also, they may be dealing with change on a personal level, which reduces somebody's receptivity to change on a professional level. So you have to take a holistic approach to driving organizational change and rolling out Microsoft Teams. I know it sounds different from what you may have been accustomed to in other Microsoft products, but this is our opportunity to go back and serve, I believe, the underserved, right? I think that people haven't necessarily been served as well as we could have as Microsoft. We created this product to bring together things that we ourselves had fragmented in the past and to address this need for more seamless, mobile, connected communication because we do know that people are going through so much change at this time. So it's very important to understand these areas. On the Adoption Hub, on the Teams Adoption Hub, we have some example surveys that you can send out. But I'm a big fan of going to the lunchroom or the coffee machine or just having one-on-ones with people and asking them, you know, what is the one thing you would change about collaborating at this company if you could? And then don't say anything else. If you're going to ask a question, listen for the answer and write it down because that will give you some very, very meaningful and low-hanging fruit to solve with the implementation of Teams. There's definitely things to remember as you're assessing your organization. As I mentioned, different groups will have different change appetites and needs. You'll need to meet the challenges of different change types with different support methods. Having champions inside your organization is another best practice we evangelize quite a lot. And we'll be releasing what we call the Champions Kit in a Box, which will help you to start your own Champions program. And those folks can come to my program and get information and repurpose it internally. But that peer learning, right? That learning from Sally down the hall, who I know and trust and who I'm not as afraid to ask a question of and look stupid in front of. Essentially, you know, people are afraid of that. There are no stupid questions, but nobody knows that. So this peer learning really helps people to understand and onboard the technology. So understanding the kinds of champions you will need as you assess the needs of the organization or the work group you're trying to transform is important. Feedback and embracing disruptors cannot be overstated in their importance. Inside Microsoft, for instance, and I see this in many organizations, people will use a Yammer group as a feedback mechanism. Of course, there's ways to report on that so you can get sentiment out of it. Other people will use an organization-wide team, and that team, depending on the size of the company, will provide a place for feedback. And that's end user feedback, people asking questions, places where the champions can interact with them. But having that feedback and those channels open, very different process from a help desk support ticket, right? So I don't want anybody to confuse those two things. They're not the same. Feedback is a place where people can voice concerns, ask questions, and interact with people who are assisting them through change. Whereas a help desk support ticket, obviously, you're usually trying to resolve a technical issue. This last piece about embracing disruptors, that can be challenging depending upon your organization. Sometimes people who are disruptors and who are dissenters or resisting your project or the onboarding to teams, feel like they make your job more difficult. But at the end of the day, when you sit down with them one-on-one, which is a practice I encourage, and you really get them to share with you what they're thinking and you're open to it, you're not defensive. I've mined some of my most important pieces of knowledge about a company from those folks. There's often history that they have in their mind that you may not be taking into consideration, or they just don't want to do it right now because we haven't made the case for change appropriately. So, I know that the habit sometimes is to turn away from opposing views. But now more than ever, probably in our organizations, it's important to embrace them in a positive way that will allow us to learn. So before I go into some of the next phases of structure and some of the technical governance components, do we have more questions out there that I should answer?
Yeah, if you don't mind, let's go back to, I think there was some really good questions. One, we got a couple of questions about why would you use Yammer over org-wide team and vice versa, assuming you have both?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Well, the first is the limitation. I'm actually going to flip back to the product here real quick. In Microsoft Teams, you can only have up to 5,000 people in a team. That is the limit of our membership right now. We will be increasing that over time. We've stated that on our public roadmap, but for now, 5,000 people is the limit. So for instance, at Microsoft, we have 150,000, 160,000 people when you account all our suppliers. I can't have a public feedback channel large enough in Teams to accommodate that audience. That's why we use Yammer for that. Yammer also provides a bit of a different conversation interface, and some companies have very much invested in that. So there's no reason to disrupt something that's already there if it's alive in your company. However, if you're less than 5,000 people and you don't have an investment in Yammer, there's no reason to make a user learn something else. So we definitely suggest, bringing those folks into an org-wide, public org-wide team and run your feedback channels from there. Because you may or may not have noticed in the interface here that as you create a team, you can, this will show up here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and create from scratch again. When this pops up, you can have more than one org-wide team. Right. And so you may have one for feedback and you may have one for, something else, patient ideas or what have you. Right. And so these are things that you can do inside of Teams to streamline the experience if you're not super large. Great question. Thank you.
Let's see. Let's go to a couple of others that there were. I think you're going to get into, I guess, are you going to be getting into the retention recommendations?
Yes.
Okay. We'll hold that then. And I guess one other question from an adoption perspective, any suggestions on getting executive buy-in?
Absolutely. So getting executive buy-in is, as I mentioned, essential to the success of the project. But the executives, maybe more than anyone, need to see this tied to something that they actually care about, right? And so when you think about the things that they need to do here, defining a vision and all of this good stuff. The vision that you're defining is, again, not about Office 365. It's about the business as a whole. So whenever I have executives that are on the fence, the very first thing I do is my homework and understand what it is that they need to accomplish. And then I can tie the use of Office 365 to them achieving their goal, number one. Number two, it's really important to provide business executives with what I call white glove engagement. That white glove engagement, often provided by champions in their community, gives them an opportunity to get comfortable with the software. Sometimes I see executives, it's almost like they get tossed in the deep end, right? Oh, they're smart, they run the company, they ought to be able to figure this out. But there's nobody more sensitive to looking incompetent in front of others than an executive. So, I really think that we need to invest more in helping them to get the most out of their technology, and especially via the mobile experience. Most of the executives that I know need to have a superior mobile experience, and that is, selfishly for them, an extremely good reason for them to onboard to Teams. They will have better quality calling, they have that ability for video calling, they can get access to information very quickly. The files and the conversations I was showing you in the web client is all available via the Microsoft, the mobile client. So everything they're looking at here can be seen, right? And they can respond, right? It has to be relevant to the way they work. So you can do it from an organizational business outcomes perspective, and you can also invest in them as ambassadors of the company and leaders of the company, and make sure they're getting the most from a personal productivity perspective. Those are the two ways that usually I'm able to bring them on board. The final, if I'm working with somebody in the CFO office or anybody who has financial responsibility at the company, is also about return on investment. You're already paying for Office 365 likely. Most folks have, for instance, Exchange Online, or maybe you have an existing SharePoint implementation. Microsoft Teams is there already. It's free with Office 365. So, while there may be costs associated with certain advanced capabilities like our phone system or Azure Active Directory Premium to do certain lifecycle monitoring, basic things like retention policies and data privacy, data governance, things of this nature, group classification, all of that is available, right with the Office 365 E1 or better license. So there's also a financial aspect of people getting the most out of what they are paying for. Another really good question. Do we have any more, David?
Let's see. There's a lot of interest in private channels.
Okay.
You touched on that. Everybody was asking. Okay, go right ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I'll talk about that before I go into some of the governance stuff by role. So let me it's not available in my demonstration environment to actually show you, but let me just, for anybody who doesn't know, if you've been living under a rock and you don't know about this conversation about private channels, let me tell you a little bit about it. So right now, when you create a team in Teams, everybody who is a member of this team, if I come over here to Contosa Health and I see this membership, right, all of these people have access to every channel or topic within the team. What folks want to be able to do is they want to be able to change the permissions or the membership to an individual channel within a team. We refer to that as private channels. We've been working on the right kind of architecture for this, and in deep collaboration with the SharePoint team. And so we are in private preview in our technical preview program with TAP right now with a limited set of customers, and we will be releasing those private channels later this year. If you are interested in that or any of the other announcements we made at Enterprise Connect, I think it's been 2 weeks ago, you can find that on our Teams blog. And there was a lot that we went over, but private channels is definitely one of them. The architecture for private channels also sets us up for other types of permission scenarios, like having a channel guest. Maybe in your organization, you're doing a health fair, you're doing an event, and you just need a supplier or vendor to have access to that channel for that period of time. And then, and they're not even in Active Directory. One of the greatest things about Teams is that you can collaborate with people outside of the boundaries of your organization and do so safely and securely. So that idea of the channel guest will also follow along at some point in the future. So private channels, I think, are essential to healthy information architecture. What I've been painfully watching happen since the launch of the product is that people would make a separate team for those folks who needed to talk about one thing. So you'd end up having a couple teams next to each other that had very similar members, but not quite. So that was super painful for me to watch as an old school enterprise content manager. So I'm really happy that this is going to come along, and also for the foundation that it sets for these other capabilities that we are really happy to see come to the fore. I don't have anything more about private channels in terms of timing. So later this calendar year is what we're saying. And that's the best that I can do in terms of timing. I know everybody wants to know.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So as we think about the different roles and the needs that they have in governance, there's another component of teams that I want to make sure that I'm calling out to you here. So there's two pieces actually. Teams allows you to use a team as a template. So I started building out here a template for a research project. Every time I do a research project, I want there to be certain channels and involved. Now you can automate this on the back end. If you're an IT pro, we have PowerShell scripts that will allow you to implement what we call Teams templates. And we're going to be releasing a whole lot more of those based on a backlog of scenarios that we have and workflows. But even if you're not, even if you're just a power user, you can make a team for yourself, and then you can add. I'm going to go ahead and add another channel. I'm going to talk about publication. I'm going to talk about, I always want there to be a, hang on a second, let me do one other thing here. Here we go. Yeah, exactly. Data and findings channel. All right. Now, as I'm setting up these channels, remember, a channel is a topic in the hub of the team, and meaning that those people who work together will need, at least some subset of them will need to talk about this. Often the best practice is, of course, to enter a description, right? Central location for sharing of data and findings for this project, right? I automatically want to favorite this for new people who come into the team, so that when they come into the team for the first time, they will see this channel, right? You'll notice I did not do that for publication. So great, I have this set up, and I can go in and configure this and add additional channels or what have you. But what's cool is that the next time I want to go and create a team, I'm coming here and I'm going to create. It asks me, hey, what do I want to create it from? I want to create it from another team in Microsoft Teams. And this will give me a list of the public teams that I have access to. And so I can pick Research Athena, and you can see it's going to try to make a copy. So I'm going to call this Research for Bob. There's an alphabetical thing going on there. I can give this particular from original template, right? And I can choose down here at the bottom. Do I only want to copy the channels and apps? Do I want to copy the membership? Because maybe there's always a group of folks who are going to be included in each of these project teams. Do I want to include tabs that I may have configured? What do I want to include? I can select those things, and I can go ahead and create. So much like, we're going to continue to invest in this area of templatizing experiences within teams, much like you've seen in SharePoint over the years. And that is really a very helpful thing. I can add additional members to this if I wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and skip that, and boom. Now I have an independent team, which I can configure any way I want. Or I can go back here to my core team, and I can add additional tabs and applications. When you hit that plus you may not have noticed, I hit the plus here to access the tab gallery. Yours may look different. Your IT department needs to approve and make sure that they are turning on access to apps that are approved for your environment. Obviously, this is the demonstration environment, so I have every third-party app turned on. In most customers, this is not the case. They'll have 12 or 15 third-party apps. But no matter what, I highly encourage you to ensure that all the first-party apps here that come from Microsoft are included, because without that, you can't enhance the experience of Teams and really get the most out of it. So, but these items can be continued to be configured And especially Forms is a lovely one for getting data back from folks. So the idea here is that even though there are many different competing priorities in an organization, Teams is flexible enough to be able to meet those needs. And of course, all of that I was showing you is created in the bubble of Office 365. And so there's a tremendous amount of security and governance capabilities for HIPAA compliance and for other rules and regulations, GDPR, et cetera, that are built into the end-to-end implementation of Microsoft 365. When we think about these different needs and the different things that they are trying to accomplish, employees versus a security officer versus legal, we realize that there are different types of governance that we want to enhance and focus on. Solution, discovery, security, and container and content. So for the most part, I tend to focus on the container and content, but they all go together in terms of leveraging the best practices in Office 365. We have an item called a trust score and it's in security scores. Your IT admins can go and take those with regard to the way that your particular tenancy is set up. That is I'll call it a little bit more of a technical action. So if you're a business user, you may not want to do that, but the infrastructure that Office 365 is providing you is based on the idea of not only proactively seeking out and making sure that your employees aren't oversharing, but also giving you tremendously robust reporting and auditing capability to ensure that you can meet the needs of whatever your business requirements are. It all, however, starts with your identity. And in this context, your identity is a combination of your location, your device, and your actual credentials. I see a lot of organizations who haven't spent the proper amount of time appropriately structuring and keeping good hygiene on their Active Directory. Again, that's a technical conversation, but it's foundational for good security and it's foundational for good collaboration experiences. Even things like having your conference room set up with the right type of resource ID in the system really helps the meeting experience as you're creating meetings in Microsoft Teams. So these three things together, your device, your location, and your core identity in the system is what controls your access to data. And that barrier without appropriate management obviously can be breached. Most of the breaches that happen today are due to social engineering, poor configurations. The instances of true hacking are further and farther between than the social engineering of someone having a password that's password 123, right? Bad idea. If you haven't turned on two-factor authentication in your environment, I believe you're remiss in securing your organization to bad things happening. So, we can help you with that. But it's important to be able to think through what you want your governance to deliver. Governance is not, people tend to think of it as the first face of security. Actually, it's the first face of freedom. Controlled, governed, appropriately secured Office 365 and 365 tenant will enable you to have self-service capabilities for your employees and still sleep at night. And this is the goal. Because I guarantee you that when self-service isn't turned on, people are using consumer apps and third-party unapproved apps in shadow IT in your organization, or they are struggling, right, with productivity tools that aren't meeting their needs. And then what you're losing is their intellectual capital and their time to be able to provide, for instance, patient care or care coordination. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy to be able to do those things well. And so it's very important that we remove barriers to people being able to really provide that stellar patient experience or have a good focus for the research they may be doing. Or, even if you're in pharmaceutical sales, that's not a simple job either and requires attention. So we want to remove these obstacles from people being able to execute. So empowering employees, making sure that we as an organization can identify that valuable content, protecting our assets, and ensuring accountability. One of the best things I think we do at Microsoft is that when you onboard as a new employee, you are required to take a security online course. It's delivered online. You have to certify that you've taken it. There's a knowledge check as you go through it. Each individual Microsoft employee is accountable for the security of our data. It does not just come from corporate IT. It does not just come from the Chief Information Security Officer's office. It comes from every one of us ensuring that we are, updating our passwords correctly, not sharing sensitive information, not storing somebody's, PII in some system somewhere, right? And then the system is, of course, looking for that as well all the time, right? It is doing the intelligent back-end searches to alert IT managers if they do find something that matches a pattern of PII data, for instance, a social security number or things of that nature. So that accountability goes throughout your organization, and there's good ways using Stream and Office 365 and SharePoint to make that a really compelling experience for your employees so that they understand that they're signing up to be a partner in the security of your data. As you go through this, you will, now before I go into some of the governance questions about Teams in particular, does anybody have governance questions about Office 365 or security questions that I should be addressing? David?
I haven't seen any of those. Most are around Teams, retention recommendations, naming policies, things like that.
Okay, great. Then that's going to be my next slide. So I will continue. So on my Teams Adoption Hub, there is an article that walks you through the 7 decisions you need to make to have a well-governed Teams implementation. And again, I encourage you to make an initial set of these decisions for the early adopters, the program team, and your champions, and then pause. Get used to it, get used to working in it, understand how you might want to do the information architecture. One of the things I always do with people is what I call a from-to exercise. If you're coming from an extremely well built out or deeply built out SharePoint infrastructure, then you're going to want to think about different issues as you come to Teams. Because of course, every time you create a team, you're creating a SharePoint site on the back end along with that Office 365 group. And you may need to use things like the application here, which I'll show you. Let me go ahead back into the tab gallery. You can add additional document libraries from other locations within Teams and have them be navigable. But oftentimes people want to do a sort of a migration, and they use this as an opportunity to cull down the information that's out there because a lot of SharePoint sites sometimes haven't been accessed. But this deeper integration with other document libraries is something we're going to continue to work on. Some people are using the SharePoint app here or the web app to be able to point back to those other SharePoint sites. So there are things to think about depending upon where you're coming from and to, and you'll find that out as you go through this governance, the initial project process. But essentially, you want to understand who can create a team. Again, we want to have that governed self-surface. So we believe that most types of full-time employees should be able to create teams. A lot of organizations, you may have people on a factory floor who are doing distribution, again, sales folks, lots of different people in your organization. Especially if you're doing first line care. That you're going to want to create a different experience for. But if you think about your corporate offices and the core of your staff, they'll probably need to be able to create teams. However, this is where naming conventions come in. And Azure Active Directory P1, you may want to have the system attach a prefix or a suffix to that name so you can better organize that. Inside Microsoft, again, another example, we've used these capabilities to label the content, right? To label it in terms of its confidentiality, right? For instance, if I have a private team that has highly confidential data in it, I can't invite a guest, someone from outside my organization into that team. You can do things like that, and we recommend that as you're thinking about ways to manage the infrastructure of Teams. Also, are you going to allow people out of the gate to use the meeting capabilities? Obviously, the meeting capabilities are an important part of this collaboration and communication experience. If I come over here into this meeting area, obviously I'm going to get a nice view of my calendar. I can coordinate with people and really have a very modern experience with my meetings. We are doing quite a bit to enhance this calendar experience that you'll see over the rest of the calendar year as well. And I'm excited about that because I think that people need to see something that's very similar to their Outlook. But the ability to schedule those meetings is also something that you may want to choose to restrict to certain types of employees in your organization. That is separate from having an actual audio conferencing or calling plan with Microsoft, which provides you dial tone services to your employees. That is usually a more advanced feature. It's part of the journey of going to Teams, but it's not usually something that you start with. Guest access, another area where you should be making, policy decisions or extending your policy to teams in your organization. But I highly encourage you to allow guests to collaborate with you because again, this is really one of those places we see data leakage, right? And then again, I mentioned before, approving the right kinds of apps and then setting up the retention policies. One of the things I'll mention there is we have organizations who do everything from 1 day retention to 7 years to 10 years. It depends upon the type of data, the type of project, the multiple layers of government or industry regulation you may be dealing with. But those policies are easily applied in the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. We've got some great videos on that. That's probably a whole nother 90-minute session going through the SNC Center. But I encourage you to think about that. Just know that Microsoft Teams is fully able to be managed through those retention policies, the chats, the calls, the meetings. Obviously, we're built on top of SharePoint Online, so all of the retention capabilities and security capabilities that you have there also carry through into the files experience in Teams. And then we also allow you to govern the app experience in our product, whether or not you want to allow people to upload apps into the store. Obviously, we have the store experience here, which is managed by your approval on or off of these different apps at a user policy level. But you can also allow certain users in your organization to upload a custom app. And then you would see here the name of your tenant as your own internal store. So there's lots of ways to manage it. It's all very robust. You can report on all of it. And it just keeps getting more intelligent too in terms of being able to scan your system for things like PII, as I mentioned. The HIPAA compliance reports come out of the box. Like, we're really trying to streamline that whole thing. One other thing I'll note is this adoption flipbook that I showed you at the beginning. Before May, we'll be releasing one for security and compliance. And so it will take you through the security and compliance story for Office 365. And it'll have a special section on compliance and security and compliance for Teams. So you'll have the ability to get that asset over the next month or so that'll help kind of walk you through the steps. And make a little bit more visual the steps that exist already on our adoption site here. As you think about going through the governance quick start, you'll be able to also see the additional links to additional guidance that you'll need and capabilities that you'll need in Office 365. So as you go through and think about these things, there are these multiple levels. We're making sure that you're leveraging Azure information protection, data loss protection as necessary. For some of you in multinationals, you may be thinking about where your users are going to be homed, where your actual tenant is going to live as its core data center. There are those issues as well. And again, this is an example of the type of container and file classification that you can pre-configure in Azure Active Directory in that P1 capability. So you can then apply these classifications to your teams. It will simply ask you, hey, what classification do you want when you create a team? And you can set what the default is. Many people have general be the default. Some firms like to have confidential be the default, and people have to choose a lower level of confidentiality. So it's going to be up to you in your business case. But then you can do things like expiration policy. In this deck are the links to the pages that allow you to learn more about how to configure Office 365 Group's expiration policy. This is an important thing to keeping the hygiene up of the system. And frankly, it's something that I highly recommend, even if you're just moving to SharePoint Modern Communication sites, because we want to have an actual employee have to renew that experience because they're still using it. Otherwise, it can automatically move through the archival or deletion process. And there's lots of configuration options involved in that in terms of steps and timing and what have you. But I like having the system clean itself. I think it's great. I think all of us have other things to do besides go around deleting sites. So the experience is an email. We're adding additional notifications inside of Teams because obviously the team goes when the Office 365 group goes. And it just gives you this great experience that allows you users to make sure that they are, keeping what they're using, but not keeping things all over the organization that they don't leave. Lastly, this is all in service of a broader information architecture that we evangelize across the variety of experiences that Microsoft 365 provides to you. And again, depending upon your role in the organization, you may or may not be accountable for this, but it's kind of good to know that there should be some sort of hierarchy to the way that this works, right? And different policies that apply at each level. At the very top of this pyramid are things like your core intranet site and hub sites in SharePoint Online and public communities. These are larger experiences that you probably want to be curated in some way. And for me, that's the big barrier, that's the big differentiator between the types, of experiences. Some are curated and some are organic, managed by the community members that live inside it. Curated experiences, intranet hub sites, the main HR site, for instance, in your organization, the main standards of care, policy information site, those sorts of things. You only want one set of that authoritative information. So those are ones that I usually advise people to go in, provision that Office 365 group. Even if there's only 1 or 2 members, hold that name. And then when you're ready, you can modernize that portion of the system along, a roadmap. The same is true for divisions and departments, depending upon how you're organized. These may be simply modern sites that are configured as an extension of the private Teams team. That's a great scenario that we're going to be teaching more about. But once you get down here to the bottom in the work group level, that's me and Mike and David. We need to get together with maybe 5 or 6 other people and collaborate on a project. I got to be able to get that experience right away on demand, governed based on the container governance that we talked about, but I ought to be able to get it quickly so we can get to productivity quickly. And then it will go through the life cycle and automatically go away if none of us have been working in it for a while. So, this methodology of approaching Office 365 governance will ultimately yield the most manageable, most usable, and most teachable experience, especially for teams. So, I have more content that you will find in this deck. Towards the end of it, there are some examples of different types of teams that you can think about creating. Of course, a lot of people like to do this cross-organizational team. That is the best practice, but people do an organizational team as well. And additionally, as you go through this, we talk a lot about success measures. Want to make sure that you are thinking about how to quantify your success measures in these 4 areas. You may find other areas that you want to use, but we believe that there are these 4 capability areas that you can improve as you're going through and doing a Teams implementation. And we usually encourage people to identify these either at the organizational, the department, or the work group level, whatever kind of implementation that we're doing, and make sure that they have a definition of what good looks like. What does success look like as you are going through this process, right? Make sure that you have the equivalent of a scorecard that is available and that you can measure yourself against. I certainly think you should be measured against it every month. Gone are the days of the 9-month project with no results. IT cannot operate that way anymore. We must embrace a more agile service management methodology, and having these correct adoption outcomes will enable us to prioritize our business scenarios differently and to have those quicker wins based on that feedback cycle, and then work with the business to understand what is the most important scenario that I should be improving at this time. Really, that's up to the businesses that, from an IT perspective, that we serve, and the people that we talk to. And being able to provide, for instance, a slide like this to your business that says, hey, your employees have told me that these things are a problem, and this is how we're ranking them based on difficulty and impact. You tell me what you would like us to do first. That's a transformative conversation between IT and business. And you'd think it happens a lot, but it doesn't always. And so being able to go through this adoption framework and do this work in this manner, we think will ultimately not only get you this improved collaboration experience, but it'll transform the way that IT is dealing with business. And we know that that is extremely important. I talk about this stuff a lot. It is my job. I do happen to love it. You can find a lot of this material either on the Coffee in the Cloud show or built into our instructor-led training to Success with Teams. You know, all these resources that I shared with you earlier are going to give you that ability to continue to expand your knowledge in this area. And of course, if you would like to, you know, be certified on this, you can go to this aka.ms adoption cert. And this course is available and covers a lot of the same material, but in depth that I talked about today. And it is free for the taking. If you do want the actual certification, there is a fee for that that goes directly to edX. Microsoft does not take a part of that. But I really believe that this course will allow you to know what good service adoption looks like. I happen to use the Microsoft Teams as the example service in the course. But the idea is that a good service adoption strategy is to some extent technology independent. So we really try to teach it this way, but for the practicum and the exams within, we use Microsoft Teams as the example item. So it's a fun thing. It just rolled over for the next quarter, and we're excited about how many people have been you know, enjoying the courseware and, you know, taking this knowledge back to their organizations to help folks do things differently. Also in the deck, you will find the Microsoft Teams resource cheat sheet. It is now actually called the M365 roadmap, right? So it is that this link will still work, but we've up-leveled it to include all the items from Windows and EMS as well. So it's an M365 roadmap. Have our Teams technical community. That's where our blog lives. Every month we do a What's New in Team post. So if you haven't gone to the Teams blog, you should definitely do that. You already saw Success with Teams and Coffee in the Cloud and our Champions program. So you know, it's always fun to come and share. And I have some minutes left to take questions or to deep dive into another particular topic along this level, if someone would like me to.
Absolutely. So Champions Kit in a Box, is that something that they're able to find on these on the links that you've provided?
Yes, you'll be, when that releases, it's not released yet. It's in final revision right now. We'll put out a preview of the kit to the Champions program first, and then we will widely release it on our driving adoption blog. In the toolkit, you can find a link to that, but I'll make sure that it goes in the post with regard to this this webcast. But we manage aka.ms. I manage Drive Adoption, and this is the blog online in the Microsoft technical community that talks about these things. The blog here is where I do the announcements about all new adoption tools. You can see here's the Certified Service Adoption Specialist, the Champions program, you know, our pre-day workshop from before. So this is the blog to follow if you're interested in new tools around training, around adoption, around these governance kits, things of this nature. All of it will show up here in this blog first.
Excellent. So are you aware of any ways for a user to request the creation of a team?
Yes, users by default can create teams. If in your tenancy somebody has turned that off, then that was a decision that an IT pro has made. It's all about how you configure the licenses and the governance on the back end. So by default, anybody with a valid Office 365 credential can go in and create a team. So somebody may have turned that off in your organization. Also, some organizations are doing things like having a form where you have to request the team because there's something that they want to do before it gets created and something that they want to do after. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I understand why it's necessary. I'm just trying to get to that frictionless collab. But anybody, if you have the rights to do so based on the configuration, ought to be able to click down here and click join or create and see this ability. I will note, though, that like in Microsoft, for instance, we do not allow our suppliers, our vendors who are on the network to create teams. You have to be a Microsoft full-time employee. So that's another nuance that you can do it by role in the tenancy if you want to.
So when you create a team and you want to include a larger size group, what's the best way to do that, to accomplish that?
That's a great question. So there's two things. As I'm adding people, I don't know if I have a, let me try full everyone. Let's see if I have a distribution group here. I don't happen to have a distribution group in this particular demonstration, but you can type in the name of a distribution group in your organization, and it will do one of two things. It will expand the group and add everyone to your team. If it's a modern Office 365 group with a little bit of configuration, you can actually support dynamic group membership. So that means that, say, for instance, you have a dynamic modern Office 365 group that someone has set up in your IT department, usually, to have, for instance, all the members of a particular region. You can use that to manage the membership of a team as well. And now that is a feature that is included, I believe, maybe Mike or Dave, you might have to keep me honest on this. I think that that is also part of Azure AD Premium. It's not available completely out of the box, depending upon your licensing, but it is a capability that exists in the system to manage membership of a team with a dynamic group. 9 times out of 10 people are doing, is that right, Mike?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, good. Just making sure I still have my chops down. 9 times out of 10, what people are doing is in this box right here, they're typing in that name for that dynamic group. They're allowing it to expand all the members. It's a one-time import. And then what's happening is those people become members of the team. And of course, as you add members to a team, for instance, you're able to choose whether or not they are owners or members of the team. Owners allow you to do obviously other settings and what have you. The other thing I should call out here, though, is that sometimes when you're joining or creating a team, what you really want to do is you want to create it from an existing O365 modern group, because then, you know, if it was a modern team site, for instance, you don't have to manage the membership at all. It's already built in. So, great question. More, sir.
Absolutely. So best practices for knowledge management within teams that don't result in duplicated docs across channels. I thought that question came up several times.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the first thing to know is paste links, don't upload documents. Paste the link. Okay, this is the most important thing you can understand. Now, we're improving some things between chat and channels and documents. There are some broken scenarios there that we need to stitch up, and you're going to see more announcements about this at SharePoint Conference North America at 3rd week of May in Vegas, and you'll find it on our blog as well. But what I'll do here, let me do a quick example. So I'm here in the main campus channel, and there's some files, and I know that I want to share this particular file with somebody over in the West areas. I'm going to come over to West, and I'm going to say, hi, Adele. You'll noticing that I am, actually, here we go. Enrico is who I'm going to share this with. I put an app mention because I want him to get a notification. Here's the document we discussed. Okay, this is what you have to train your end users to do. They're going to hit this little attach button here, and they're going to say browse teams and channels. As they browse, there are no files here in Health West, but I can click this button and usually navigate up, right? Here we go. navigate up to the main campus folder, and here's this class copy of the healthcare presentation, and I can share this link right here. So there's no duplication there. I'm sharing a link to the file in its original location. What people tend to do is they tend to like try to upload files again for some reason, right? And so that's odd, and you shouldn't be doing that. The file lives where it lives. Now, this was easy for me to do in this particular team because obviously I'm a member of this team, the file's in the team, etc. If the file lives someplace else, in some other location, I can take a look at that by going to my Files app, and I can see files from other different types of different teams that I belong to, right? And so I can take opioid effects here. I can go ahead and hit this ellipses, and I can get a link, right? And so this is a thing that confuses some people. Why are you giving me two choices, Microsoft Teams versus SharePoint? The reason for that is likely in your organization, you're making your transition to Teams. Maybe not everybody's working in Teams yet, but they still need to get to this document. You can go ahead and give them the link that'll take them directly to the SharePoint site that is managing all of the file experience. But if you're sharing it with a colleague who you happen to know is already working in Teams and you know, it will make sense to them that they're getting this link from Teams, you can simply copy that, right? And then I can actually even go into a chat. For instance, maybe I want to chat with Alex here, right? And I can say here, here's the link to the file. And I can paste that in and send it. Now, it's not a pretty link, right? Especially not here. And I'm hitting a little bit of an error in my demo tenant. But the point is that being able to paste this information into private chat is important. Now, what I will tell you is we're going to improve this process of finding links, okay? What we're going to do is when you find those links, we're going to streamline that. We're going to make it look just like Office Pro Plus so that you only have one thing to teach your end users, and you'll be able to set permissions on that link. Do you want them to be able to edit, or do you just want them to be able to view the document, just like you can in SharePoint and Office today? So I'm looking forward to that coming. I think it'll streamline this experience more, but the key is links, and don't upload it 5 different places.
Excellent. Let's see if we can get in 2 more questions. We're coming up on the bottom of the hour here. So
okay. I'll be quick.
Let's see, on the SharePoint side,
Yes.
Do SharePoint admins have visibility to the sites created by Teams?
Yes, they do. They can
Excellent.
run all of the audit reports, everything that they need to do, their management, their PowerShell. At the beginning, you may have heard that they didn't, but that has since changed. Beginning meaning 2 years ago when the service launched, but that has since changed.
And let's wrap it up on this question came up a few times, Teams on iWatch.
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I don't know. You have stumped the expert. I do not know the answer to that. I will have to take that back to the team who's doing all the iOS development and circle back with you. I would imagine that because my notifications in Teams come through the core notification service in iOS, there's no reason why they wouldn't notify you on your iWatch. But I have not personally tested that, so I'll have to find out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karuana. That was a fantastic session. Certainly appreciate that.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
So everyone, just want to kind of conclude today's session. Again, a big shout out to all of you for joining. We certainly appreciate your time and attendance. I would also like to thank Mike for producing the event. And as we look to next steps, so we ask you to please keep an eye on the Microsoft Healthcare and Life Sciences blog, aka.ms/HLS blog. That's aka.ms/HLS blog. And if you want to know more about Teams, please contact your Microsoft account team. We'd love to come out and talk to you more about this fantastic application we've brought to the market. And just as a teaser for tomorrow, so day 3 will be about accelerating Microsoft Teams adoption, case study of accelerated adoption to 200,000 plus employees. Thank you again for your time.